The TOMY Sonic the Hedgehog line has been around for nearly 3 years at this point, and throughout those years we've seen many releases. In early 2014, it was announced that TOMY would become the new master toy partner for Sonic, and would begin producing products based off of the then new sub-series Sonic Boom. While pretty alright, TOMY's Sonic Boom releases failed to impress many longtime Sonic merchandise fans. These were released right after Jazzwares Sonic had abruptly ended. Promises of unreleased Jazzwares products were still fresh in many fans' minds, and for many people, these Boom figures didn't cut it. I personally like most of the Boom merchandise, and I collect the line to this day, but many people were not happy with what TOMY was releasing. 2015 came and went without much fanfare. TOMY released only a handful of Sonic products that were noteworthy. With that said though, it was the year TOMY established themselves as a company that would be willing to release an official Tails figure covered in oil, so I guess that's something. However, in 2016, everything changed. To the appreciation of fans everywhere, TOMY finally stepped out of Sonic Boom with the release of their 25th anniversary figure and plush lines. These were the first Sonic releases by TOMY that really got people's attention. The figure sculpts accurately captured the character's likeness, and the plushes had a great sense of style and look unique. The care that TOMY put into these classic products was very evident. By the end of 2016, TOMY had made merchandise for both Sonic Boom as well as Classic Sonic. However, they had still yet to release products for the modern main series design of Sonic. I was surprised that they didn't release anything modern for the 25th anniversary, but I knew it was coming eventually. And at the beginning of 2017, it was finally announced that at long last, TOMY would expand into modern Sonic. In 2017, TOMY introduced their Sonic the Hedgehog Collector Series line of figures and plushes, a line that focuses on both classic and modern Sonic. Fans got hyped, to say the least. It had been 3 years since the last modern Sonic release by Jazzwares, and actually, it had been 3 years since any modern Sonic toys hit many retailers. Never forget that 3-year gap where outside of some select releases such as the great stuff from GE, we didn't get anything in terms of merchandise for the main design of Sonic. With the release of the 2017 TOMY catalog, it was announced that the first modern Sonic figures in years would be released in May 2017, packed in comic book packs with their classic counterparts. Yeah, for whatever reason, TOMY, as of right now at least, isn't releasing the modern characters in single packs, 3 packs, or anything like that. They're exclusive to these comic packs, and you have to buy the classic figures in order to get them. That soured the hype a little bit, but still, TOMY Modern Sonic was finally officially a thing. It was announced that Wave 1 would consist of comic packs of classic and modern Sonic and Knuckles, and a second wave of comic packs of Tails and Metal Sonic will be coming later this year. The announcement of these was so exciting, and the wait for their release was very tough. But then, May 2017 came and nothing was released. But then, in June of 2017, they started showing up online, but still weren't in stores. But then, in July of 2017, they finally reached stores such as Toys R Us, Amazon, and even TOMY's own website. Modern Sonic figures are back, but how good are they? The Sonic Boom stuff doesn't have the best reputation, but the anniversary figures were highly praised. So how did these turn out? Well, let's find out. Let's start by taking a look at the packaging these come in. If you've seen the 25th anniversary comic packs that were released in 2016, the packaging for these should look very familiar. The figures come in a tall, rectangular box, and while it may seem oversized considering that these are two 3-inch figures, you do have to remember that the boxes are shaped this way to house the included comic book. The packaging is basically a restyled version of the anniversary boxes, now featuring the dark blue color scheme and swirls that's been featured on all of the new TOMY releases. I'm a big fan of TOMY's new packaging style. Both the 25th anniversary packaging and this new style has this sleek and clean look to it, and I really like it, even if it is really simplistic. The front of the box clearly displays the two figures inside, and both of them are leveled differently, which makes them pop and makes the box look a lot more interesting than, say, the anniversary boxes. The top and bottom of the packaging is lined with the same pixelated design seen on the anniversary boxes. This is also where the characters' names are displayed. While the classic characters are officially called classic here, the modern characters are simply referred to as the character's name, which is interesting. I guess TOMY and Sega have decided that the modern designs of the characters should be referred to as the main designs of the characters. Towards the bottom of the box, there's also an orange swirl graphic, with the text comic book 32 pages, along with pages translated into many languages. Some odd wording there, but it gets the job done. The sides of the box are basic looking at first, but they do have some pixels detailed, which even have texture to them. The back of the packaging features artwork of both the classic and modern counterparts for each character, both housed in different styled boxes. Something cool with the surrounding boxes is that they're colored differently for each character, so the Sonic pack has them in blue while the Knuckles pack has them colored red. The classic characters are represented by 2D artwork, while the modern characters use 3D renders. Now, this is just a personal preference, but I'd much rather have the modern characters also use 2D artwork. Not only would it keep the two more fitting with each other, but I've always believed that Sonic characters look much more appealing in 2D. But I guess it makes sense as the two different styles help the two designs stand out from each other. There's also another swirl graphic behind them, as well as more pixels scattered throughout, which all looks nice. As was the case on the anniversary boxes, there's flavor text written for the characters. These descriptions could be easily missed though, as, given Tomy's apparent need to make their boxes as universal as possible, the descriptions are written in several languages. It makes the descriptions look more like legal information than anything else. Seriously, the font is so small it's almost hard to read. But anyway, Sonic's description goes as follows. Sonic is steadfastly, single-mindedly, and sincerely all about speed. He runs fast and talks a blue streak. He is impulsive, intuitive, spontaneous, and quick-witted. On top of it all, Sonic cuts a dashing physique, and his charisma is electric. Bit of an interesting description there. Why they felt the need to mention Sonic's electric charisma, I will never know, but hey, it's a unique description. That cannot be said for the Knuckles one, however, as it's just a copy and paste from the one on the anniversary box. But still, it goes as follows. Knuckles is a strong, heroic echidna and one of Sonic's closest allies. Knuckles' strength and huge spiky fists, coupled with his extraordinary martial arts skills, allow him to punch through walls and defeat enemies on his adventures to save the day. Even if they are in really small font, I still appreciate these descriptions. Makes the boxes for each character way more unique, and I always like seeing what they put here. The bottom of the box is nothing special. It's where most of the legal info went. Opening the boxes is actually very simple. All you have to do is lift some flaps and you're in. There isn't even any tape on the outside of the box, making it very possible to open the box without destroying it, which is much appreciated. Sliding the plastic that holds the figures out of the box, you can see that the attention to detail on the packaging even extends inside. In the box behind each character is a swirl that's color-coded for the two eras. Classic has an orange swirl while Modern has a light blue one. Above that is the era-specific logo as well. These inserts are very cool, but unfortunately they're taped down, so removing them from the box would be difficult. The included comic is held in by being wedged in between the plastic. The way it's put in actually causes the comic to warp slightly, but it's not too bad. The comics are housed in a plastic bag, which is sealed with tape. All you have to do is cut the tape and you can slide the comic out of the bag. The figures are also easily removable. I've already removed them, but there was just a few bands holding them in. Just cut those and you have access to the figures. Overall, the packaging for these is fantastic. The pack looks great in the box. I also really appreciate the amount of character-specific content on them, such as the characters' names and of course the artwork on the back. But that's enough about the box. Let's talk about what comes in these packs, starting with the comics. Here are the two comics you get with the figures. Sonic Universe issues 75 and 87, from the Sonic and Knuckles packs respectively. Both issues are relatively unchanged from their original release. There's no collector's edition markings like there was on the ones that came with the Jazzwares comic packs, though there are some changes, such as the removal for the advert of the Sonic and Mega Man Worlds Unite crossover that was on issue 75's original cover. It goes without saying, but the covers for these two issues look great, and that's important here as these two covers are what you see inside the box, so them looking fantastic is an absolute must, and they certainly do. Both comics include a story relating to the pack's specific character. Both are great reads, have fantastic art, the great coloring you'd expect, and all around serve as excellent additions for these packs. Usually at the end of the comics included in the comic packs, they would have an advertisement for whatever line they're included in. You could find this advert included on the back of many of the Jazzwares comic packs, and with the comics released in the anniversary packs, you could find this advert for the Sonic Boom line. However, for these, they don't end with an advert for the Collector Series or anything. Instead, the last 3 pages are dedicated to a preview of Sonic Mega Drive, and the end also advertises the Archie digital comic app, which is an interesting choice. See, this ad and the overall release of these here is all a bit in vain, considering that the Archie Sonic comics were unfortunately announced as cancelled only a few days after these packs started hitting store shelves. I'll return to my thoughts on this at the end of the video, but for now, let's move on to the figures. I know everyone's interested in the modern figures, but let's get these classic re-releases out of the way first and save the best for last. These two figures, the classic Sonic and Knuckles, are re-releases of the 25th anniversary figures that came out in 2016. I've looked at these figures in the past in my review of the 25th anniversary releases, but I'll quickly go over them again here. One thing I like about them is that they're not exact replicas of existing artwork or models. For example, the Sonic doesn't look like the classic Sonic that's in Generations or Forces. It does look more closer to the 2D artwork of classic Sonic that we see, but it still has its own unique flair. TOMY really put a lot of thought and care into these figures, and it shows. They're excellent, and to top it all off, they don't just have good sculpts, they have a great amount of articulation as well. You can move the figures at the head, and their heads move fully around, or at least Sonic's does. Knuckles obviously gets cut off by his dreads. They can also move all around at their arms, as well as at their legs, which was something new to the classic figures. The Boom figures didn't have that. Something else the Boom figures didn't have was wrist and ankle articulation, which these classic figures have, allowing you to twist their hands and shoes. This doesn't seem like it would improve the figures too much, but it makes them so much more versatile. The Boom figures were nice, but you really couldn't do much with them. But with the added articulation, these figures can pull off way more poses, and it improves the figures so much. These figures are great. They were great when they first came out in 2016, and they're still great now, but maybe not as great. When these packs were first announced, I was curious as to whether or not these re-released figures would have any differences compared to the originals. While it's true that they're the same in terms of sculpt, in craftsmanship such as paint job and how they're made, they do have some differences. Here's a comparison of the classic Sonic. On the left is the original release that you could find in the anniversary single packs or comic book packs, and on the right is the 2017 release. They don't look too different at first, but when you closely compare them you can see some differences, and they're unfortunately not for the better. The first thing I noticed was classic Sonic's head. On the 2016 release, it has a smooth and matte-like finish. The re-release, however, has a shiny look to it, making it feel more like cheap plastic. On the re-release, there's also many visible seam lines, and while they were there on the original, they're much more noticeable on the re-release. The paint job on this new Sonic also not only looks sloppier, but the paint also looks muddy. You can really see it on his stomach. In addition, Sonic's gloves, socks, and shoes are no longer shiny. This isn't too big of a deal, but it would have been nice to see it carried over on this re-release. This one is barely noticeable, but if you turn his head, you can see that there is some extra paint behind his muzzle that shouldn't be there, and that wasn't there on the original. Overall, the re-release classic Sonic feels a lot cheaper than the first release. Knuckles, on the other hand, is a different story. Knuckles' changes are far more subdued. For instance, Knuckles' head still has that matte finish to it, which is nice, but it makes you question why Sonic doesn't have it anymore. There are still some slight changes though. Most seem to be cost-cutting ones like on Sonic. This Knuckles actually fixes something that was wrong on the first release. On the 2016 classic Knuckles, he actually had a problem with his eyes. On the original release, both eyes had different shine details. Obviously that should not be the case, and as such TOMY went in and fixed that, so now both have the same detail. There are some other paint differences, but Knuckles seems to have fared much better than Sonic with this release. There is one issue though, and from what I've seen this is a common issue, that being that his head is very loose. You can really shake it around. The reason why these differences, while slight, are noteworthy is because, well, you're forced to buy the classic figures in order to get the new desired modern figures. I'm sure this won't be the case forever, but again, as of right now, these modern figures are exclusive to these comic packs. Everyone has been waiting for the modern figures to come out, and when they finally do, they're exclusive to $17 comic packs, with figures that have already been out for nearly a year. The thing is, if you were looking forward to the modern figures, you probably already own the 25th anniversary releases of the classic figures, so it's of course going to be annoying to have to rebuy them. And the fact that the re-release classics are of lesser quality than the original just makes it even worse. If they're going to make fans pay for these again to get what they really want, they should at least make sure it's not a worse version of a product they already own. Though, even with the problems the new releases of the classic figures have, they're still nice figures. If you don't have the original releases of them, these are perfectly fine. You won't even notice the differences unless you already own the originals, and even then it's not that bad. But enough about the classic re-releases. Let's move on to what I'm sure everyone's interested in the most, the modern figures. Well, here they are, the TOMY Modern Sonic and Modern Knuckles figures. We've waited a long time for these to come out, so do they live up to the hype? I'd like to start by saying that these two just look great. TOMY has always been masters at capturing the characters' designs, and these two don't disappoint. As for articulation, okay. Over the years, Tomy has always gotten criticism regarding their articulation style. The Boom figures couldn't exactly do too much. However, they really upped their game with the classic figures, so one would assume that they would use that articulation style on the modern figures, right? Well, they didn't. The modern figures use the same articulation as the Boom figures. You can move them at the head all around, though again Knuckles' dreads get in the way of his head movement, even more so here than on the classic figure. They once again can fully move at the arms, which allows for a lot of movement, so that's great. But here's where things get somewhat questionable. They can't move at the wrists, so their hands are stuck in the position they come in. Also, side note, it's interesting that these figures' hands are sculpted in fists. Most of the Boom figures and even the classic figures have their hands opened, so that if need be, they can hold accessories. These modern figures, though, their hands are fully closed. Though I did find this one piece of concept art for the figures, which actually does show them with opened hands, but this isn't the case on the final figures. I wonder why they decided to go with fists. I guess Tomy didn't care to make sure that modern Sonic could hold the Enter Beam. Their legs can swivel back and forth, but they cannot move all around unlike the classic figures, so they are much more limited in that regard. Well, yes, they do have enough movement for running poses, jumping poses, that's fine, but the classic character's leg articulation was so much better. I'm disappointed to not see it on these. And of course, you can't twist them at the shoes, unlike the classic figures. I'm not usually one to complain about articulation. I'm more into a figure that just looks good, and to be fair, these do, and I'll get into that in a second, but it is disappointing that these don't have the same level of articulation as the classic figures. Why did the classic figures get special treatment while the modern figures are limited like this? I get that it totally made the figures cheaper to produce, but come on! That little extra level of articulation would have made these figures so much more appealing to many people, and would have vastly increased the amount of things you could do with them. The inconsistencies in regards to the articulation on the modern figures is made even more apparent considering that they come packed in with the classic figures, which have far better articulation. I guess maybe you could argue that the modern figures are larger than the classic figures, thus justifying it, but come on, these aren't cheap figures, they could have pulled it off. The articulation is fine, but it could have been so much better. Anyway, back to the sculpts on these. I can't find much wrong with them. One aspect of the sculpt that has to be commended is Tomy's excellent use of bends and curves to help the figures pose better. Sonic's legs not only have a little bend to them, but his shoes are just slightly curved, both of which work together to make his running poses look more natural. And the same goes for Knuckles. Knuckles' arms are also curved, which helps him get into more dynamic poses. These little added elements of character to the sculpts really go far to help with posing, and make the figures look a lot better, as they don't look as rigid or stiff as they would without them. As for paint job, it's once again pretty good. They're similar to the re-releases of the classic figures in that it's mostly flat paint everywhere, apart from the eyes. Yeah, you can't see it that well on camera, but their eyes do have some shine to them, which I guess was a nice touch. Speaking of eyes, Sonic's eyes seem just a bit larger than they should be. Interestingly, on the prototype that we saw at Toy Fair 2017 and on the product image for this pack, Sonic's eyes look much closer to their normal size. I wonder what happened during production that led to them being this large. Knuckles' eyes, however, are way smaller than Sonic's, which looks pretty strange when you have the two figures standing next to each other. There is no consistency here. But regardless of that, the colors all seem to be accurate, though one oddity is that it seems like the paint may not be all that strong, as the paint on my Sonic's arm joints have already started to flake off. Just moving the joint scraped some of it off, so watch out for that. Let's talk about the scaling between these two. One thing Tomy has always been commended for on their Sonic Boom line is that they always did a good job scaling the characters. Tails is correctly short and Knuckles is correctly tall. It seems with their modern figures they will continue to scale them decently well. I say decently because if you compare the heights of the Sonic and Knuckles figures, you can see that Knuckles is correctly taller than Sonic, though I think overall Knuckles is slightly larger than he should be. I don't know, maybe this is correct, but to me it looks just a little bit off. I definitely appreciate them trying to scale the figures though, as most companies make the two the same height, which is not correct. The modern figures also scale well with the classic figures, which was definitely not the case with the Jazzwares line. They look really good together. The Boom figures, however, do not scale with the classic and modern characters, which makes sense given that they're from a separate line. To be more accurate, the Boom characters would have to be a little bit taller than the modern characters, which is not the case. Hopefully future modern figures follow a similar scaling, with the modern Tails for example being shorter than Sonic. That would really give this line an edge in terms of accuracy when compared to previous Sonic releases, such as the Jazzwares line. Speaking of, let's compare the 3-inch Tomy figures to the previously released 3-inch Jazzwares figures. Usually I wouldn't compare two companies' lines so closely, as each company always goes for their own unique style with their releases. But Tomy has taken a lot from the Jazzwares line, so comparing the two is noteworthy. I don't want to say that Tomy has copied Jazzwares, but you can see that they've definitely taken a lot of inspiration. They've both released comic packs, both have 3-inch figures, both even have translucent figures. Yeah. Here's the 3-inch Tomy Sonic compared to the Jazzwares Sonic. First thing of note is, wow, these two actually look pretty similar. Obviously, they're not the same figure and look very different in terms of style and articulation, but overall they are similar. Both figures stand at around the same height. In fact, the TOMY Sonic actually could serve as a good supplement to the Jazzware Sonic if for whatever reason you can't find one. The main pro to the Jazzware Sonic is its articulation. The sculpt of this Sonic is good, but its articulation is where it really shines. Jazzware Sonic can bend at its elbows, knees, it can twist at the waist, wrist, ankles, it's very poseable. TOMY Sonic, on the other hand, is not nearly as poseable, but is that a bad thing? Well, it depends on what you want out of a figure. Do you want a figure with tons of articulation? One that can be put into many poses? Then Jazzware Sonic is for you. However, articulation isn't everything. The TOMY Sonic, in my opinion, just looks better than the Jazzware Sonic. I have tons of memories with the Jazzware Sonic, and it's a great figure. But the thing with the articulation is that the joints can make the sculpts look somewhat inaccurate. Sonic characters just have this flow to their design, and that flow gets lost when you put many joints on them like this. Sure, you can't bend his elbows, but the TOMY Sonic works much better as a display figure, and given the Collector Series name this new line has, that's probably what they were going for. On top of that, TOMY Sonic feels a lot more solid and better built than Jazzware Sonic. The Jazzware's figures had some pretty rough quality control, leading to many figures being loose and/or being able to break easily. Due to the simplicity of the TOMY figures, this isn't as big of an issue, so the figures feel better constructed. I know the lack of articulation will be a turnoff for many people, but if you just want a good-looking Sonic figure, the TOMY Sonic is perfect for that. And hey, why not just get both figures? It's not like you just can't get the Jazzware Sonic anymore. Both are great representations of the character, and I recommend both of them. Just for completion's sake, here are the two Knuckles compared. The TOMY Knuckles is noticeably larger. This is due to the Jazzware's Knuckles not being scaled to Sonic like the TOMY one is. Besides that though, the differences are basically the same as Sonic. While we're comparing figures, let's bring out the old 1999 figures made by the company Resource for Sonic Adventure. These Resource figures are some of my favorites. Being from the first ever Sonic action figure line, they aren't perfect replicas of the characters, but I really like how they look. The reason I bring them up, however, is that the articulation of the two figures here is very similar. The Resource figures do have wrist articulation, but apart from that, the articulation is identical. In a similar case to the TOMY figure, the Resource figures work much better as display pieces rather than figures to play with. Now, we already have these 3 generations of Sonic figures out, so why don't we add the original Toy Island Sonic so we have all 4 main companies' Sonics together? Welcome to the lineage of Sonic figures, TOMY Sonic. You know, actually, looking at these 4 generations of Sonics, it shows that this TOMY Sonic is kind of generic. You look at Resource Sonic, Toy Island Sonic, heck, even throw in Joyride Sonic. These figures all look very unique. And hey, even Jazzware Sonic was completely different than all of those. TOMY Sonic though, what's special about it? I mean, it's a great figure, but compared to previous releases, it's somewhat underwhelming. It's clear TOMY took huge inspirations from Jazzwares on this one. These modern figures are pretty much what I was expecting. Low articulation, but high quality in every other aspect. They make for great display pieces, and are definitely worth picking up. Though, maybe not in the current packs they come in. So, are these comic packs worth it? Yeah, they totally are, but only if you don't already own the classic figures that come with it. If you do, you'll just have to decide how much you want the modern figures. New modern figures were enough for me to justify buying these, but I'm not sure how many people feel the same way. What gets me is that these packs are currently the only way to get the modern figures. TOMY made it so that to get the figures that fans have been asking for years, they'll have to rebuy figures that they potentially already own, and in my opinion, that was just unnecessary. There is no reason as to why we couldn't have gotten modern figures in single packs or even a 3-pack. Does that sound familiar? Yeah, that's exactly what they did for the 25th anniversary line. Why aren't they doing it with the modern characters? Look at the Boom figures. They get released in 2-packs, and those 2-packs are usually under $10. Regardless of what you think of Boom, that's a really good deal. Why did these 2-packs have to be packed with an Archie comic? Yeah, it's cool, but would you rather have a $10 2-pack with just the figures or a $17 comic pack? I mean, I get why they made the comic packs. All they had to do for these releases was sculpt the new modern figures. They already had the classic figures made, and the Archie comic obviously was already released. Despite how cool these packs are, I can't help but realize how much of a cash grab these feel like. Releasing single packs or even 2-packs of the modern characters wouldn't have made TOMY as much money in the short term, but not forcing fans to rebuy figures or potentially buy figures they don't even want would have been beneficial in the long term. Maybe TOMY just has no faith in modern Sonic. Maybe they think it won't sell without a classic figure. Obviously, that's not true, and hopefully they realize that soon. Also, you have to wonder how appealing these packs are to those who aren't into Sonic. Imagine you're a parent who knows next to nothing about Sonic, and you go to buy your kid a Sonic toy. don't you think they'd wonder, hey wait a second, how come this one pack contains 2 Sonics? Does my kid like both? What's going on here? And then they look at the other Sonic products on the shelf, only to see a leftover Sonic Boom figure from 2014, and then they come to the shocking realization that there are currently 3 different versions of Sonic being sold to them at the same time. There's a lot of brand confusion with Sonic right now, and these packs certainly do not help with that. The idea of a pack that contains 2 different artistic stylings of one character I suppose is a cool idea, but in my opinion, the execution could have been better. One thing I'd like to bring up is the possible future re-releases of these figures that we could see, and what personally I would like to see. We've seen countless times in the past that TOMY loves to release variants of their figures. These include such timeless pieces such as the Oil Tails figure, as well as the amazing Dirty Sonic figure. Yeah, so when TOMY doesn't end up making certain characters that fans want, you can always remember them as the company who instead made an intentionally dirty Sonic Boom figure, complete with mud and dirt deco. What I'm getting at is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure people don't like variants like these. Now, if you like Oil Tails, I completely understand, but your average fan or general buyer is not interested in stuff like that. The thing with the Sonic series is that you don't even need to do weird variants like those. Well, maybe with Sonic Boom, but with modern and classic Sonic, the possibilities of easy-to-make canon variants of the characters is so huge. Just look at the Jazzwares line. One thing Jazzwares was really good at was repurposing their sculpts to make variants that fans would actually want to buy. Sonic with Caliburn, the Freeriders line, stuff like that. I know they have some appeal, but come on, a black and white classic Tails figure is not going to get fans excited. So chances are, we'll be seeing these figures re-released many times in the coming years. But the same can't be said for the included Archie comic. Alright, I've danced around this topic thus far in this video, but let's talk about this. On July 19th, 2017, it was officially announced that the Archie Sonic comic series would come to an end after 24 years of running. It was a sad announcement, and even with the confirmation that IDW will start up a new Sonic comic series in 2018, the end of Archie Sonic rightfully hit many people hard. On top of everything else, the announcement does make you wonder, if Archie Sonic is over, what's going to happen to these comic packs? With Archie losing the Sonic license, there's no way that the included comics could continue to be reprinted. Chances are that soon, if not already, TOMY will have to stop production on these packs, and will have to either change the comic for something else or remove it altogether. That means that these first release of these packs won't be in production for much longer, so if you want to get these, get them before they disappear forever. To be fair, the figures themselves of course will continue to be made, but these specific packs with the Archie comics will soon become desired collector's items. Another thing, these 2 packs weren't the only comic packs TOMY had planned. Packs of classic and modern Tails and Metal Sonic are still slated to be released later this year. What's going to happen to them? Well, to find the answer to that question, I reached out to a representative of TOMY, and here's what they had to say. We are of course aware of the situation with Archie comics and have to react accordingly. Both Tails and Metal Sonic packs will be released later in the fall 17/early spring 18 seasons to overcome this decision. So they are still coming out, but here's where things get really interesting. They will come with a special comic book of which we cannot share details of at the moment, but should please the fans. Do not expect anything in stores before December 2017 though. So the Tails and Metal Sonic packs are still happening. While this answers some questions, it raises even more. So, these packs will still be coming with a comic? A special comic book? One that should please the fans? That's very interesting. Maybe they'll end up coming with comics made specifically for the packs? Now that would make the packs totally worth it. Unfortunately though, this does mean the packs will have to be delayed. They were originally said to be coming out as early as September 2017, but according to the email I received, we shouldn't expect them before December. I hope the wait is worth it. You know, as much as I like the comic packs, I wouldn't be opposed to TOMY dropping them. The comic packs are a great concept, but from the perspective of someone who just wants to collect the figures, them dropping the comic packs, or any other type of special pack for a more standard 2-pack wouldn't be that bad of an idea. Compare the comic packs to the Sonic Boom 2 packs. The comic packs have an MSRP of $16.99, while the 2 packs can usually be found for $9.99 or under. I'm sure these would sell much better at that price point. Even just releasing the modern figures in single packs like what they did with the Boom figures would be nice, and collectors and fans everywhere would be thankful. When you think about it, these packs represent both ending and beginning. Ending, because these will most likely end up being the last official release of Archie Sonic. After these packs, we probably won't be seeing Archie Sonic officially ever again, which gives these packs an oddly sentimental value to them. However, they also signify beginning, because these are the start of TOMY Modern Sonic and the Collector series as a whole. We've waited years for it to happen, and it's finally here. Now all we need is for TOMY to realize how much people want modern figures, plushes, etc. With the success of the 25th anniversary line, we're already seeing that TOMY has more than enough faith in classic Sonic. So hopefully these packs and the other modern releases coming out this year will do the same for modern Sonic. These figures are a solid start. Now it's up to TOMY to make as many characters as possible and to make this line really worth it. If you don't already have the classic figures from 2016, I definitely recommend these packs. While a bit pricey, you do get 2 nice figures, as well as one last chance to officially buy an Archie Sonic comic. If you do have the classic figures, I can only recommend them if you really want the modern figures. Well, okay, actually, when TOMY inevitably ends up losing the Sonic license, these figures will become hard to find and rare. Maybe having some extras to sell off later isn't such a bad thing. And as I've said, chances are that these specific packs will become very hard to find quickly, as due to them containing an Archie comic, this release of them at least won't be on store shelves for a long time, so they're destined to become collector's items very fast. Going off of Sonic and Knuckles, TOMY really has something going here, and if they can manage making other figures with this level of quality, we could have a very solid Sonic line in our future, and I'm so thankful for that. Sonic merchandise has kinda fallen on hard times as of late. It seems the merchandise for Sonic Boom didn't sell very well overall, leading many stores to pull out of Sonic. My local Toys R Us, for example, currently only has a few leftover single pack anniversary figures, and of course many discounted Big Head Knuckles plushes. I've heard of other stores completely dropping Sonic as well. I'm hoping this new Collector series can really turn things around. Cast your mind back to the early 2010s, when Jazzwares Sonic was at its peak. Tons of stores stocked the items, Toys R Us dedicated tons of shelf space to the line. It was great, but as newer merchandise has sold poorly, the selection of Sonic merchandise nowadays in stores is nowhere near what it was back then. I'm hoping these packs sell well enough to show stores, TOMY, even Sega, that people still care about stuff like this. We still want merchandise of modern and classic Sonic. These figures doing well is pivotal to the future of Sonic figures, plushes, Sonic merchandise in general. If these sell well enough, it'll show TOMY that we want more stuff like it. They'll make more modern merchandise. They'll release more modern characters. More modern and classic merchandise made with collectors and fans in mind. And that's what we really want here. Whatever ends up happening with the TOMY Sonic line in the future, I can rest assured saying that these packs, and more specifically these modern figures, are exactly what we needed right now. And I'm very excited to see what's in store for the future of TOMY Sonic.